It was shaping up to be a pretty typical Tuesday. I'd poured myself a strong cup of coffee, a dark roast blend I get from the local roastery, and was settling in to work from home. I'm a freelance graphic designer, which means my living room is often transformed into a makeshift office, scattered with sketchbooks, mood boards, and half-empty mugs. The peace was palpable. The kind of quiet where you can hear the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle rustle of leaves outside. I was halfway through mocking up a new logo concept for a tech startup when I decided to head out for a quick run. Needed to clear my head and stretch my legs. I live in a relatively quiet suburb, a mix of families and older folks, with well-manicured lawns and an unspoken code of neighborly politeness. Except for Karen. Karen, my next-door neighbor, was a walking, talking embodiment of everything that grinds my gears. She was the type who complained about the length of my grass, which, let's be honest, was perfectly acceptable, the volume of my music, which I only ever played at reasonable levels, and never after 9 p.m., and the audacity of me parking my car too close to her driveway. It wasn't. She was a constant source of low-level irritation, fueled by a potent cocktail of entitlement and, let's be frank, thinly veiled racism. I'd learned to mostly ignore her, offering polite nods and short responses whenever she cornered me with her complaints. Engaging only seemed to egg her on, validating her skewed perception of reality. I suspected she saw me, a young black man living alone in a house that was arguably nicer than hers, as some kind of affront to her meticulously curated suburban life. Around midday, after a productive morning, I laced up my running shoes. Before leaving, I glanced at the monitor connected to my home security system. I had cameras installed mostly for peace of mind. The neighborhood, despite Karen, was generally safe, but I liked knowing what was happening on my property, especially when I wasn't there. Everything looked clear. The front yard was empty, the backyard was quiet, and the inside of the house, as far as the cameras could see, remained undisturbed. All right, I said to myself, grabbing my keys, just a quick loop around the park. I'll be back before you know it. I locked the door, stretched for a minute, and took off down the street, enjoying the feeling of the sun on my skin and the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. I figured I'd be back in less than an hour. I had no idea that my definition of typical Tuesday was about to be drastically redefined, all thanks to my Wi-Fi router and the insatiable entitlement of Karen. I had been running for maybe 20 minutes, deep into my usual route through the park, when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my security system. Motion detected, living room. My brow furrowed. Motion in the living room? That was unusual. I hadn't left any windows open, and the doors were definitely locked. Maybe it was a glitch. The system had been known to throw false alarms on occasion, usually triggered by a particularly strong gust of wind rattling a windowpane. But something felt off. A prickling unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I picked up the pace, my thoughts racing. Was it a break-in? Did someone manage to bypass the security system? The thought of someone rummaging through my belongings, violating my space, made my blood run cold. Another notification popped up. Motion detected, living room. This time, followed by a short video clip. I stopped running, my heart pounding in my chest, and clicked on the clip. The grainy footage showed my living room, bathed in the midday sun. Everything seemed normal at first glance. Then, I saw it. A hand reaching in through the window. My window, the one above my router. A window I distinctly remember closing. I zoomed in, my eyes narrowing. And there she was. Karen. Her face contorted in a mask of concentration, her blonde hair slightly disheveled. She was leaning halfway into my living room, her arms stretched towards the back of my router. I watched in stunned disbelief as she fumbled around, presumably trying to read the Wi-Fi password. My initial reaction was pure, unadulterated rage. The audacity. The sheer gall of this woman creeping into my house, violating my privacy, all for the sake of stealing my internet. But the anger quickly morphed into a strange sense of disbelief. It was almost comical, the way she was contorting herself, struggling to reach the router. She looked like a cartoon character desperately trying to snag a prize from a claw machine. But the humor was fleeting, replaced by a deeper sense of violation. This wasn't just about stealing Wi-Fi. This was about disrespect, about entitlement, about the ingrained belief that she, Karen, was somehow entitled to whatever she wanted, regardless of the consequences. I watched the video clip again, each replay fueling my anger. I needed to get home. I needed to confront her. I needed to figure out what the hell was going on. I sprinted the rest of the way home, my adrenaline pumping, my mind racing with 1,000 different scenarios. By the time I reached my house, I was practically out of breath. I slowed to a walk as I approached my front door, trying to compose myself. I didn't want to go barging in there, screaming accusations. I needed to be calm, collected, and armed with undeniable evidence. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, my senses on high alert. The house was quiet, eerily so. I crept towards the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. The window was slightly ajar, just enough for someone to reach through. I took a deep breath and walked over to Karen's house, trying to maintain a facade of normalcy. I knocked on her door. It took a few moments, but eventually, she answered. Her expression was carefully neutral, almost bland. "Clay," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Is there something I can help you with?" "Yeah, Karen, there is," I replied, my voice tight. "I was wondering why you were in my house while I was out." Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice rising an octave. "I haven't been in your house." "Really?" "Because I have video footage of you reaching through my living room window, trying to steal my Wi-Fi password." Her face flushed red. "That's ridiculous," she exclaimed. "I would never do something like that." "You're making things up." "Am I?" "Because I can show you the video right now." I pulled out my phone and started playing the clip. She watched for a few seconds, her eyes darting back and forth, her face a mask of denial. "That's not me," she finally sputtered. "That could be anyone. The quality is terrible." "Karen, it's clearly you. I know it's you. My security system knows it's you. And frankly, I'm not stupid." I took a step closer, my voice hardening. "Why were you trying to steal my Wi-Fi?" She huffed and crossed her arms. "Fine. So what if I was? Your Wi-Fi signal is stronger than mine, and I'm tired of paying for slow internet. So, instead of asking me politely, or even offering to split the cost, you decided to break into my house and steal it?" "I didn't break in. The window was unlocked." "It wasn't unlocked, Karen. I always lock my windows." She scoffed and turned away. "Whatever. You're overreacting. It's just Wi-Fi." "It's not just Wi-Fi, Karen. It's about respect. It's about privacy. It's about you thinking you're entitled to take whatever you want, regardless of the consequences. This is not okay." I paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm going to let this go, this time. But if you ever, try to pull something like this again, I will press charges. Do you understand?" She mumbled something under her breath, but I couldn't make it out. "Do you understand, Karen?" I repeated, my voice firm. "Yes, fine, I understand," she said, finally meeting my gaze. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. I changed my Wi-Fi password, upgraded my security system with even more sophisticated motion sensors, and tried to put the whole incident behind me. But Karen, it seemed, was not one to let things go so easily. The next few weeks were a living hell. It started small. The sprinkler accidentally watering my car every morning. The garbage cans being mysteriously knocked over in the middle of the night. The anonymous complaints to the homeowners association about my unsightly landscaping. Then it escalated. I started receiving strange phone calls, hang-ups in the middle of the night. My mail was tampered with. And then, the real kicker, she began spreading rumors about me to the other neighbors, whispering lies about my supposed criminal past, my shady business dealings, and my general lack of respect for the community. It was a calculated smear campaign, designed to isolate me and make my life as miserable as possible. At first, I tried to ignore it. I chalked it up to Karen's usual brand of crazy, hoping it would eventually blow over. But the rumors started to take hold. I noticed the other neighbors avoiding me, their smiles replaced with suspicious glances. I felt like an outcast, a pariah in my own community. I tried to confront Karen again, but she just denied everything, playing the innocent victim. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she would say, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "I would never do anything to hurt you, Clay. You must be imagining things." I knew she was lying, of course, but I had no proof. It was her word against mine, and in this predominantly white, conservative neighborhood, her word carried a lot more weight than mine. I felt like I was losing my mind. The stress was overwhelming. I started sleeping poorly, my anxiety levels through the roof. I couldn't focus on my work, and my business started to suffer. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day of dealing with Karen's harassment, I snapped. I went over to her house, determined to put an end to this madness once and for all. I knocked on her door, my fists clenched. When she answered, I didn't say a word. I simply showed her the evidence I had been compiling, screenshots of her harassing emails, recordings of her whispering to the neighbors, even a blurry photo I managed to snap of her tampering with my garbage cans. Her facade crumbled. Her eyes widened in panic, and she stammered, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain, Karen," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I'm done. I'm going to the police. I'm going to tell them everything. And I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done." That seemed to be the breaking point. Her face contorted in a bizarre mixture of rage and despair. She started screaming, ranting about how I was ruining her life, how I didn't belong in this neighborhood, how I was everything that was wrong with the world. It was unsettling. Her rant escalated into a full-blown meltdown. Neighbors started emerging from their houses, drawn by the commotion. They watched in stunned silence as Karen screamed and gesticulated wildly, her face red and contorted. It was clear to everyone that something was seriously wrong. I stepped back, feeling a mixture of fear and pity. I hadn't wanted this. I just wanted her to stop harassing me. But now, it was clear that her actions were driven by something much deeper, something beyond simple spite or racism. It was a mental illness, plain and simple. Someone called the police. When the officers arrived, Karen was still ranting, her words becoming increasingly incoherent. They tried to calm her down, but she resisted, screaming and kicking. Eventually, they had to restrain her and take her into custody. As they led her away, she locked eyes with me, her expression a strange mixture of hatred and pleading. She looked utterly broken, a shell of the woman she once was. The neighbors who had previously shunned me now looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. The truth was out. Karen's mask had finally slipped, revealing the unstable, unbalanced personality beneath. The police questioned me for hours, taking detailed statements and collecting all the evidence I had gathered. They assured me that they would investigate thoroughly and that Karen would be held accountable for her actions. The next day, I learned that Karen had been admitted to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. The doctors diagnosed her with a severe narcissistic personality disorder, exacerbated by underlying anxiety and paranoia. It was a sad situation, really. While her actions were undeniably wrong and harmful, it was clear that she was also a deeply troubled individual. The police informed me that they would be pursuing charges against her, including harassment, stalking, and property damage. I initially hesitated. Part of me felt sorry for her. But then I remembered all the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the stress, the damage she had inflicted on my reputation and my business. And I knew that I had to press charges, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might become a target of her irrational behavior. The legal process was long and arduous. Karen's lawyers tried to argue that she was mentally incompetent and therefore not responsible for her actions. But the prosecution presented a strong case, highlighting the premeditation and calculation behind her harassment campaign. The evidence was overwhelming. Eventually, Karen pleaded guilty to several charges, including harassment and property damage. She was sentenced to a period of court-mandated therapy and a restraining order was placed against her, preventing her from contacting me or coming within a certain distance of my property. But the most significant outcome was the civil lawsuit I filed against her. I sought compensation for the emotional distress, the damage to my reputation, and the financial losses I had incurred as a result of her actions. The lawsuit dragged on for months, but eventually, we reached a settlement out of court. Karen's insurance company agreed to pay me a substantial sum of money, enough to cover my legal fees, compensate me for my lost income, and provide a financial cushion for the future. It wasn't about the money, really. It was about justice. It was about holding her accountable for her actions and sending a message that this kind of behavior would not be tolerated. In the end, I moved to a different neighborhood. The memories of Karen and her harassment were too strong, and I needed a fresh start. I found a beautiful house in a quiet, diverse community, where I felt welcomed and respected. I rebuilt my business, stronger than ever, and I started focusing on my own well-being, practicing mindfulness and surrounding myself with positive people. The whole experience was a traumatic ordeal, but it also taught me some valuable lessons. It taught me the importance of setting boundaries, of standing up for myself, and of seeking help when I needed it. And it taught me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter future. As for Karen, I heard through the grapevine that she was still in therapy, slowly working through her issues. I hope she eventually finds peace and healing. But I also know that I can't let her actions define me or my life. I have to move forward, to focus on the present, and to build a future filled with joy, success, and genuine human connection. Maybe, one day, she will understand the magnitude of her actions. But until then, I can only focus on myself and my own healing journey. The Wi-Fi password incident, as ridiculous as it sounds, changed my life forever, but it also made me stronger, more resilient, and more determined to live a life free from fear and harassment.